it did take cancer for me to actually start prioritizing my health. One of the things that I've been doing for the past 5 months, ever since I discovered I had cancer, is indulging in deep rest. Even the language around it is funny. Another frustrating comment that I often got in this journey is, "You have cancer? Oh, but you've always been so healthy." And the truth is, I've not been healthy. I've just been slim. I actually see it as a gift that came into my life. Because I don't think I would have ever had these conversations or these thoughts if I hadn't been pushed against the wall so harshly, as cancer has done to me.
Welcome to another episode of Love Matters, where we deep dive into topics of the heart that matter the most. I'm your host, Leeza Mangaldas, and today we're exploring a subject that's both personal and universal: a woman's relationship with her body. Often, it is one of the most fraught relationships there can be. The guest we're going to be unpacking this subject with is Karuna Ezara Parikh. Karuna is a woman of many talents. She's one of the most recognizable writers of our generation, and her beautiful novel, The Heart Asks Pleasure First, and subsequent poetry collection, Where Stories Gather, received widespread acclaim for their treatment of themes like love and identity. She's also been a TV presenter, something we both have in common. And before I share further context with our listeners, Karuna, I want to welcome you to the show. Hi, I'm so glad we can talk today.
Hi, Lisa. It's wonderful to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us. Now, earlier this year, I'd read the publisher's announcement of Karuna's upcoming book, Water Baby, a memoir chronicling her experiences from her television days, hosting a wildly popular show about beach destinations, but where the camera typically focused more on her body in a bikini than on the travel itinerary. And as someone who's presented football in unjustifiably tight dresses, often also as the only woman in an all-male crew and for a largely male audience, I could relate to that media landscape that Karuna was describing, and I thought we'd have so much to discuss, given that the book explores her journey to finding comfort and confidence in her own skin. And when I called Karuna to share this idea, she actually shared something that ended up reconfiguring the conversation somewhat. She shared that her book was on hold and that she'd recently been diagnosed with lung cancer. She explained that she was experiencing perhaps the most profound inflection point in her relationship with her body. So it seemed fitting that we talk about how contending with the body in a state of crisis makes you reassess your relationship with your body anew, while honoring all that came before, as well as looking forward with hope for all that is yet to be experienced. So, Karuna, I want to dive right in and ask you, how are you feeling in your body today?
Hi, Lisa. Oh my goodness, that was a wonderful introduction. It made me feel really good. And I actually woke up really excited today because one of the things that I've been doing for the past 5 months, ever since I discovered I had cancer, is indulging in deep rest. Even the language around it is funny, right? I just use the word indulging. And should it really be an indulgence? I don't know. Shouldn't it be something that we allow ourselves anyway? But that's what I've been spending the last few months doing. And part of taking that space for deep rest was accepting that I will not be working a certain way. And so today I woke up with great excitement because I thought, wow, I'm going into the studio after a while and I'm going to be doing something that really sparks creativity. And it felt good, particularly doing this after such a long break. And the funny thing is, I think if it had been part of my regular life, and if this had been 6 months ago, I would have just come into the studio to meet you, sure, with some level of excitement, but mostly, I think, with the attitude of this being just another work thing. And instead, I've come in here really appreciating creating something with someone like you. So it puts things in perspective, doesn't it? But today I feel good.
Thank you. I have goosebumps just hearing you describe that. You sent me a voice note earlier saying that it took cancer to recognize that you can look after yourself in the ways that, let's say, indulging in rest perhaps seems vital and not an indulgence. And that isn't it unfortunate in so many ways that we don't look after ourselves, just every day. So what has that been like for you? Kind of taking care of yourself in these new ways, and does it make you re-examine your previous relationship with your body in a way that perhaps you should have had permission to do this all along?
Hmm. Yeah, that's such a good question. I absolutely did not take care of myself for many, many years before this. I was someone who went to the grocery store and thought, oh my God, those walnuts are really too expensive. I'm not going to buy them. And the very same evening would go to a bar and buy a cocktail for more expensive than that, right? And I think a lot of us think like that. And investing in our health is, it feels a little boring. It feels like something that should be left to the later years. And I, for example, always thought I had a little more time to kind of mistreat my body. In fact, it wasn't even such an active thought, it was just the way I went about things. And no regrets, of course. Uh, I truly mean that. I'm not someone who is looking at cancer and saying, "Oh, I wish I had done this differently," or "I wish I had not done that." I think this is also part of the journey, and I'm curious to see where I end up on this journey and at the end of it. But yeah, it did take cancer for me to actually start prioritizing my health. And when I say health, I speak of it holistically. I am speaking about the physical aspect, whether it's eating right, getting enough sleep, just allowing myself a day off work. And I also speak about the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of it. I have been deeply out of touch with those things. And I think most of us as a generation are. We work way too hard and we have a lot of guilt when it comes to our work. We have a lot of guilt when it comes to our rest. I have had to actually work very hard to shed that guilt. And even now, there are days where I tell myself, "Oh, you're useless. You're doing absolutely nothing. Like you're fine. Like why are you just lying in bed? Get up and do some work." And then there's a second voice that I've had to develop a conversation with and a relationship with in my head that comes in and says, "You have cancer. You have every right to rest. And even if you didn't have cancer, you still have every right to rest." I do think it's also part of a deeply capitalist society and economy and time that we live in, hustle culture. But really,
It's like exhaustion
who
is a
are
status symbol.
exactly, like who are we trying to prove what to when we are working ourselves to the bone like that? So yeah, it did take cancer, and in a way, I'm almost grateful that this very feared disease came to visit me, because I don't know if I would have ever actually stopped and paused and given myself the time I needed to relax, actually, to put it simply.
I can only imagine though the journey it's been. I suppose a lot of emotions come up
Yeah,
when you find that your body is in a state of crisis, I had a lump in my breast recently. It turned
I'm
out to be
sorry.
benign, but just the word cancer and the
Yeah.
like the whole process was very it was a roller coaster. The discovery, the just trying to be objective about it, and also like hustling along because you don't yet want to tell people, but you're dealing with this while
Mm.
also trying to deal with real life. Do you want to take us through the sort of process of
Oh
discovering this
yeah.
diagnosis, making sense of it, getting to a point where you're you know willing to talk about it in a public setting like this, because that is also important, I think, for people to know what you're going through, but
Hmm.
it can take time to feel ready. I'd love to just hear what it's been like for you.
Gosh, yeah. Firstly, I'm sorry that you went through that, because I've had scares like that in the past as well before this happened. And I know how harrowing that is. And we live in this world currently, we live with so much fear of cancer. And I think there's this feeling that, well, all of us are going to get it someday. It is the disease of our times, and it is very much a lifestyle disease. In fact, most of the research that I've done over the last 6 months shows me that even if you do have cancer genes, um, or cancer prone genes, let's say, you can control that with your lifestyle. And I think we are not given that tool to begin with. We are not given that information. Big pharma definitely benefits from us not knowing that our lifestyles have the power to turn those genes on and off within our bodies, or those cells on and off within our bodies. So yeah, I'm sorry though, that sounds scary, and uh, whether or not it's benign, I think that process is always very difficult, and I've been there before. So yeah, but in my case this time, I found a lump in my neck, at the base of my neck, and it's interesting, right? Because I think, Lisa, you know this, that when it comes to women and cancer, the two cancers we're told to really look out for are breast cancer and cervical cancer. So those are the things that we really focus on as women, right? We now, most of us know to check our breasts, to get frequent pap smears, to check our breasts in the shower, for example, mammograms. Um, but and of course, that is a wonderful and very good thing, because we went through many years in the history of the world where these were the cancers that were most ignored because they only happen to women, right? And to me, what's wonderful is that finally there's a focus on them. And of course, these cancers affect women in astronomically high numbers, but it doesn't mean you cannot get other cancers. And in some way, my reading of this today is also we need to move forward from just checking for these cancers, because once again, they kind of reduce women to their reproductive or sexualized parts. And a woman is an entire body, a woman is a human being. And it's ridiculous that I have to say that sentence, right? But the fact is, I never once thought that I could get cancer anywhere else. So, I checked my breasts, I looked into the HPV vaccine, all those things that are um, feminine cancers, let's say. But cancer is not gendered in so many ways. And so I never thought to check on other things. So when this lump came up on my neck, I immediately thought it was something else. In fact, the doctors wanted to test for tuberculosis because that's what they thought it was most likely going to be. And it turned out to be pretty advanced lung cancer. And I went through a series of tests immediately. And I say this to anyone who finds anything weird on their body: do not hold it to yourself. Do not wait. What really saved me was going to a doctor immediately. The day I found the lump, I was at the GP by that evening, and the next morning I was getting an FNAC, which is a fine needle biopsy. I was, getting scans, x-rays, all of it within 24 hours. And I'm so glad I did. And I will say this, I was scheduled to go for a writing retreat to Goa. I was teaching a writing retreat there. And because I wasn't taking it very seriously, when the lump came up and I was prescribed all these tests, I said, right, but I need to go to Goa first. And the doctor looked at me like I was insane. And so I changed my ticket. I got all my tests done, and of course found out that there was a malignancy in my body. So yeah, it was a strange process, and it is not what I had planned for at 39. No one does. The other thing I do want to say is, and I think this is another way women don't take care of themselves. Look into medical insurance. Whatever age you are, you should have a medical insurance. Life is full of surprises, and not all of them are kind surprises. So just small things like that I'm grateful for, and that I pass on to anyone who comes at this with fear. There are ways that you can prepare for the worst without it actually being a panic button. So yeah, but it was sobering, of course, when I first found out, and it was terrifying as well. But I also decided, Lisa, that I don't want to choose fear. I think as women, we have incredible strength, right, within us, and I do think women are really spectacular when it comes to that. But that also means that very often we don't we tend to hide let's say, our deepest fears. Very often, when it means that we need to protect family members or we need to put on a brave face, we do that. And so I will say, while I didn't choose fear and I decided that that's not going to be the path for me over here, I did give myself the days I need to feel those things, to be scared, to be terrified, to mourn whatever came before this. I knew that my life was going to change forever after this. So I just took the time to kind of mourn that as well. And I didn't move fast. This is the other thing. Yes, I did the tests really fast and I got the results, and I knew that the way forward was going to be probably chemotherapy, which I'm now in hospital for mostly, and uh, other newer treatments, but I wanted to take my time with it. So I actually took a month between diagnosis and starting treatment. And that's typically quite long when it comes to cancer. I think most people decide to move within a few days sometimes of a diagnosis. But I just want to say, for anyone listening who might go through this, or who has a family member going through this, or has ever thought about this, that you are allowed to take your time. You are allowed to set the pace that you want. You are allowed to get comfortable with an idea of a, I don't even want to say a sick body, but an altered body before you actually move to heal it. So I think it's very important to take that time to gather the information that you might need on this journey, to gather the people around you who are going to support you for it, to talk to different doctors, to meet perhaps holistic healers, whatever it takes to make you feel comfortable on the journey. And so much of this being a success is how you approach it. So this is how I wanted to approach it, and I think it served me well so far. So yeah.
I think for a lot of people, it can be quite like people feel like they don't know how to receive this information even when someone
Mm.
shares that they've been, say, diagnosed with cancer. I think often, and you said to me, I don't need this energy of people like fearing the
Yeah.
worst or this doom and gloom energy. And I think people don't like, nobody talks about even how to have these conversations. So for me, it's
Mm.
really, it was very special also that you were willing with such warmth and candor to talk about this stuff, because I haven't even really, I didn't know how to share even just the fact that like I maybe had something up with my boob, to tell my mom. Like she was crying on the phone, like nothing even happened yet. And it can be so hard to have these conversations. You feel like you want to share, but the other person might not receive. You also don't want pity, and it's really quite a
Mm.
difficult to navigate topic. I think for many people, either when a loved one is going through something or when they themselves are going through something and want to share. So I'm grateful for this opportunity to navigate that with you, and for you to really. With so much openness, share from your perspective.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much, Karen, for being willing to have this conversation, And your book, What a Baby, when I read about it and before we'd even gotten in touch, I was so, I mean, already that was exploring your relationship with your body in so many ways, right? Focus on breast and cervical cancer, but just in general, like there's this tendency to see women as vessels of reproduction, you know,
Hmm.
um, in society and often in medicine also, and then in the media, the tendency to sexualize, right? And I just would love to hear from you how you reflect on all of this. This might be quite a long answer, but since your body was quite
Yeah.
front and center in your imagination already at this point, writing Water Baby, I think like
Yeah.
reclaiming the body is something you've spoken about a lot, and
Mm.
I'd love to hear what that meant for you in the context of everything that you'd been through up until this point, and then
Yeah.
perhaps the new reflections that came after the
Mm.
diagnosis.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I want to just go back to one of the things you said about, people bringing their own energy to my diagnosis. And that's been so interesting because so much of what we project upon ourselves are the opinions of other people, right? And we live in, especially in India, I think, actually, I don't know, perhaps all over the world, but I speak for an Indian context here. We live with this immense pressure of the outside world and the scrutiny of the outside world constantly. And that too is something I had to renegotiate when it came to cancer because I was used to being a yes girl, right? And I was used to kind of just being polite about things constantly. And I don't think we realize how much those things are making us unwell as well. And when I got cancer, it was one of the things that I felt I'm going to draw a line about, because I remember the first few people who found out. Um, some of the responses were pretty weird, I'm going to say. They were really strange things that came up. And of course, everyone has an opinion. Every auntie has an opinion. Everyone wants to tell you how they think you're looking. So, one of the big things for me is that my chemotherapy drug is such that I haven't lost my hair. I am losing it currently. And every time I brush it, a piece of my heart breaks, because my hair, I've made it a part of my identity. It's very much a security blanket for me over the years. Um, I know many people have referred to me as, oh, the girl with the long hair, because that's always been me. And so I needed to cut it. I know it probably doesn't look short to anyone right now, but it feels very short to me because I cut off a whole chunk, and it's still falling. But because I mostly look like this right now, uh, I think that was one of the things most commented on when I stepped out of the house or bumped into people or met relatives. It was like, "Oh, you look great. You look so good. It doesn't matter." Like, and just because I look a certain way right now, or I haven't lost my hair, doesn't mean I'm not suffering from the chemotherapy. It doesn't mean that internally I'm not in pain or nauseated all the time, or having a difficult time with this, right? So I think that was one of the harshest realities, that people are just going to judge you by how you look. And that works both ways. Um, Even the fact that I've lost a lot of weight. I've lost weight partly because I became healthier than I've ever been in my life, but also because with cancer, your body is unwell. You typically do lose weight, right? And as a society, again, we are so conditioned to believing that weight loss is always 98% of the time is a great thing. And until you look emaciated, which of course then you are again blamed and bullied for, any kind of weight loss is usually seen as a great thing. And I find that so problematic, Lisa, because, you know, the last time I lost a lot of weight, I was severely depressed. And now I've lost all this weight and I have cancer. But people tend to equate weight loss with positive things. And it's really frustrating to often hear people say that. And separately, I mean, I have never been overweight myself. Um, but I also think the problem with that is I used to eat very, very unhealthily constantly. I lived on a diet of like high carbs, sugar high carbs. And I didn't put on weight possibly because I had very high metabolism due to very high anxiety. And that was no healthy way to be living. But because I was relatively slim, I think I got away with it. No one would ever turn to me and say, hey, you need to be healthier. And I think the same way we kind of fall for the idea that someone who's larger is unhealthy, which isn't always true. We also fall for the idea that someone who's slimmer is healthy. So, again, another frustrating comment that I often got in this journey is, you have cancer? Oh, but you've always been so healthy. And the truth is, I've not been healthy. I've just been slim. And it's kind of shitty that people equate the two, and that there's so little room for nuance when it comes to viewing our bodies or the bodies of people around us. So, yeah, I just wanted to talk about that for a second. And I feel like, and this relates to what you were asking about the body and my relationship with it through this journey. One of the things that's happened is, for the first time, because I've also been kind of in this quarantine situation at home alone most of the time, either with my mother or my partner or my dog, a very kind of limited amount of people can see me because of my very low immunity levels right now. My body's also been desexualized in some sense, because it's not on display. I'm not dressing up, I'm not going out, I'm not being seen. And so for the first time in a long time, it's kind of like I have my own COVID lockdown, all by myself. Um, so if you look back to that time, perhaps you'll also remember what it felt like to not wear makeup, to not have to dress up, to just be alone at home with your thoughts and your being, your internal being. And another decision that I made very soon after the diagnosis was that I didn't want to be on social media. It was too difficult to view the outside world and everything that was happening, and fashion launches and politics and even everything that was happening, let's say in Palestine, which I had been very invested in. I just could not witness those things any longer. I kept up with the news, but I could not have that endless scroll either of joy or of sorrow, of what's going on in other people's lives. So I cut off from that as well. And I certainly was not in a place to share anything from my own life in this time. I wanted to digest it for a long time before I got to this point. And honestly, this is, I think, the first time that I'm talking to anyone about this in a way where it's going to be witnessed publicly. So I think that changed my relationship with my body in this time as well, where it's not a body on display. And female bodies in particular are constantly on display. And it has been so refreshing to remove myself from that. And it has allowed me to, in a sense, be more than my body. My relationship with myself is very much right now a relationship with my innermost self, and I finally brought those things back to the forefront after years. And so it has been 6 months of kind of negotiating my spiritual being or my emotional being, of journaling daily, of meditating, of bringing those aspects of physicality back. So that's been super, super interesting. We were talking about reproductive aspects of a woman. And I don't know if many people know this, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what chemo does to the body in terms of those things. Is that all right?
Of course, of course. There's so many aspects of what you just said that I'd love to talk about some more. But first, let's absolutely talk about how chemo can impact fertility.
I'll just say a little bit about that because I think most people, and particularly menstruating people, do not know much about this. And I was certainly not told this, but when you have chemotherapy, because it's just such a high dose of very toxic materials going into your body to kill cancer cells, you essentially lose the ability to menstruate for the time that you are having treatment. Now, that may differ based on the drug that they choose to give you. But one of the other things that happens is if you're my age, I'm 39 right now, if you're my age, which is close to 40, you might actually completely lose the ability to have children. You are essentially rendered infertile after this. And it's interesting to me that the doctors did not tell me that. And I'm really going to some of the best doctors in the country, and I'm so grateful for it. But I was never actually told that by any doctor. And it's something that I needed to find out through friends who've had cancer before me, and through the online space. And I felt like that is something that I should have been told, if at 39, I'm going to lose that ability. Perhaps I wanted to have a child. I mean, side note, I did not want to have a child at this point. But if I had wanted to, I think I would be devastated. And I also don't know if at 39 I was ready for menopause. And I'm not sure at this point if my body is going to respond differently to the treatment or what's going to happen in the long run. But it is very strange to be sort of experiencing symptoms of menopause at 39 when you're certainly not ready for it, and to have not even been told these things. So I just thought that's also interesting. Um, Many women, if anyone's listening here and this context is for you, I do say look into, say, freezing your eggs if that's what you want, because you might not have that ability after this. But yeah, it's just interesting how there's so little information because it's a woman's body.
Yeah, and there's also, I think, again, social media, medical, all avenues via which women's lives are impacted and shaped and controlled, um, typically tend to deny women agency. You know, it's
Yeah.
like by design, women's agency is systemically surveilled and controlled. I imagine across various times in your life, as also in mine, we've probably experienced firsthand some of these ways, you know, whether it's a lack of agency in terms of how you're perceived just because you look a certain way, or because you're you know, hosting a travel show, making sex education content online, or like that you talked about what a relief it is to not be on display. But even if one is on display, it is a shame that one kind of loses the ability to kind of ensure you're read the way you wish to be read, right? Why could I not choose my own clothes as a football presenter? The men were wearing
Yeah.
suits, you know, and sneakers, air conditioned and freezing in the studio, and you're in a bandage dress. Or you're on a football pitch in stilettos making holes on the pitch, like super uncomfortable. You can't eat anything. That's how
Yeah.
tight the dress is. And you don't really
Yeah.
have a say. Like if you want that paycheck, you wear what you're told and you go do your job, and you're too young to really even see that lack of agency as an issue. You just think this is how it is. You know, the
Yeah.
doctor also like this is how it is. With women, your lack of agency around your body is just supposed to be this is how it is. Marital rape is still legal, you know, um, and premarital sex is frowned upon. So you can't even sort of like
Yeah.
do what you can neither say yes nor no on your own terms in so many ways, right? Before we move on, I'd like to recommend another great podcast to you. If you're like me and love to hash out every burning culture question, then tune in to Respectfully Disagree, a weekly audio podcast from the Swaddle team. From whether hookup culture is empowering to why trad wives are cool again, nothing is off limits. It's smart, it's sharp, and full of respectful disagreement. Check out Respectfully Disagree wherever you get your podcasts. And now, back to Love Matters. I would love to hear your thoughts on just agency. It sounds like in some ways you've been thinking a lot about agency and also reclaiming more and more age. I feel like even just going from 20 to 30 to 40 is like a
Yeah.
really powerful process of, you know, taking back some of your agency. What are your thoughts on just sort of female agency, you know, in the body, both as a physiological entity as well as a social and gendered
Hmm.
entity?
It's so funny, the things you were saying about wearing a dress on the football field and all. I was thinking about all those times when in my early 20s, I think we were probably on television around the same time, you and I. And I was remembering all those times where, you just feel like such an idiot. And I can imagine when it comes to sport, it was even more exacerbated because, you're kind of standing next to men who are just wearing like jeans and a t-shirt or a suit, or speaking to like sweaty players, and there you are, like dolled up as if you're about to go to the disco. So I can only imagine what that's like, and I had several experiences like that where I just felt like I was being reduced to a body or a bauble, really, and I was not there for how I could speak or present or for my brain at all. And I remember that. And you say that we are scared in those moments to ask for better or to demand something different. And I remember that feeling as well, thinking, oh, but what if I lose my job because of this? Or what if you don't want to be the difficult woman at all. Like, God forbid, So I remember that really clearly. And I just want to relate it to what I've been going through, because those feelings don't end, right? We continue with them as we grow older. We carry them with us. And unless we actively fight them, I think they become a part of our beings. And we just continue to say yes to things that we don't actually agree with. And it's interesting because right at the start of this journey, I was reading about different responses people have had to diagnosis. And one of the key things that was found is that women who typically asked a lot of questions and demanded a lot of answers from their doctors statistically tended to live longer post cancer treatment. And it just goes to show, right, that all that suppression and all that submission, somewhere it's also messing with us internally. And I think, like, for anyone who thinks that you're being difficult if you put up a fight, maybe this statistic will help you. Because, and not just for cancer, for anything out there, right? Anything, we should be demanding more. We should be demanding better pay. We should be demanding better hours off. We should be demanding, someone like avert their gaze when we don't want it on us. We should be demanding a change in laws, all of it. So, yeah, I actually found that really heartening, and I decided to utilize that fact more. And going forward, maybe asking for better. And I can't believe it took cancer for me to actually do that. But it took me back to these early days of filming and um, even writing for magazines, where, say, a publisher once asked me if I had had a boob job. Uh, I mean, just my boss casually asking me that, when I went to tell him I'd filed an article. So, it took me back to all those things and reminiscent of the stuff you were talking about as well. And I think particularly for women who have families, that is something to really, really look at. We always put our partners and children and in-laws and parents before us, always. They ask for anything, and we are there. We turn our lives upside down in order to provide whatever emotional care we can, often financial care, physical labor, all of it. And I just think that somewhere it's killing us on so many different levels. Yeah, it's pissing off, but I think that we know enough now about the body, mind, and body spirit connection to know that saying yes to those things and gritting our teeth and getting through them and constantly putting someone else before us, it's not just exhausting and pissing off. It is inside your body, it is creating a rot of some sort. So that's also part of what I've been looking at in these last few months, the idea of agency and what it does to us internally.
That's so powerful, Karna, and it really like hits hard because I think the idea of beauty and acquiescence is something that women owe to the world. You know, it's like the rent you pay, and
Mm,
whoever pays that rent
yeah.
best, like gets the golden apple. Where I think as a young woman, there's you're bombarded with this messaging that like your appearance is the most important thing, and you should always women don't get angry. You should just be pleasant looking and pleasant, right? Like that's
Yeah.
what you and constantly minimize, like make yourself small, don't even laugh too loudly, don't sit with your legs apart, don't ask too many questions, don't but also be presentable, have your hair tidy, have your, like this whole thing of making yourself palatable and small and undemanding, I think is so relentlessly sort of hammered in. And even if you have parents who are not like that, and I'm grateful I didn't have that conditioning directly from my parents, but it is so pervasive that the idea of the good woman as like a beautiful and acquiescent being, especially in a pre-social media era where I feel like we had less diverse reference points and things as well. I think that there's so much internalized misogyny also, where like maybe 20-year-old Leeza didn't even see the issues with being in that tight dress on that pitch, or maybe even, I mean, it's a glamorized
Yeah.
role. Like, okay, I guess, like, maybe, I mean, you kind of know that how you look did play into why you were hired. It helps that you're educated and can speak and all of that. So now you're the golden girl who looks good in the tight dress and can speak English, and you recognize like everything that's wrong with that, everything that's wrong with that. But you do it
Yeah.
anyway, partly because you have bills to pay, but partly also because I think there is some amount of internalized misogyny where male attention seems like something that's can you but like male attention is valuable. That what a scam. It's so unfortunate how we're recruited into being foot soldiers of our own and each other's, sort of like, like how closely can a woman follow a beauty standard, how straight,
Mm,
shiny, long, etc. can your hair be, or how perfectly round can your boobs be, or your finger. Like there's beauty standards for every single part of the body, right? And even when
yeah.
despite feminist and queer and other wonderful reading and kind of like ideas that you try and immerse yourself in, just even when you know better, you still like, I will still look in the mirror sometimes and wish I had a prettier knees or like thinner thighs or bigger whatever, right? Even though it
Yeah.
really wish that given all that I know now, I did not feel that way. Do you struggle with that still? The relationship to beauty and beauty standards and
Oh,
um,
definitely. I mean, and you can imagine like having cancer. Um, Initially, there's you look tired so many days. You come home and you look awful. You're gray in the face, your hair's coming out in clumps. You're just kind of lying there. You know that you're not desirable at this point. So it's a constant fight in the head even now. But like I said, I have actively been working on that. And I think this is part of what, in feminist discourse, we call radical self care, right? Because there's one aspect of self care which, is it's not an unnecessary version of it, but it's just one version of it where, you make sure you book yourself the massage and you take the day off and you spend time in the shower and give yourself a nice shampoo and get the manicure, all of those things. But then there's the radical aspect of it where you really do have to change the fabric of your thinking. And that is a self care on a different level. And, what you were talking about and this misogyny and how it becomes so internalized, it also becomes weaponized because we begin to use it not just against ourselves, but against each other. And that is the tool of patriarchy that, is placed in our hands and we brandish it so conveniently. Men don't really need to do anything because we take each other down so often, and I think that's the kind of radical self care that I've been looking into, where I check myself when I'm speaking about another woman in those tones. I check myself when I'm making a joke about the way someone looks or how they're dressed or, why is she behaving that way. And that's not to say that, you don't discuss human behavior, but I think it's important to question whether we're looking at something through a gendered lens. And what you were saying about us constantly saying yes to these things, to the bandage dress and to looking good and, oh, I'd better do this, I'll fit in more. I think the darker side of that is when we start blaming ourselves for not fitting into those things. And then the next step is we start blaming each other for certain things. And I found this even with the cancer. Like, for example, when I told certain people that I had lung cancer, one of the things that often came up is this idea of blame. And it was like, what did she do wrong? And I get that that comes perhaps from a sense of fear. uh, People want to know what I did wrong so that they can tell themselves that they aren't doing that. So, for example, a couple of people were like, oh, she must have smoked a lot, or I'd better stop smoking now, or I no longer smoke like that. Or one friend sent me a message saying, I hope you will stop smoking now. And the fact is, I've never been a regular smoker. And the kind of lung cancer I have typically affects non smokers. And that's just the truth of it. That's not to say smoking is good for cancer. It's terrible. And one of the first things they do tell you with any cancer is if you do smoke, you might want to stop that. But I wasn't even in that position, right? But people were looking to blame me, especially other women were looking to blame me for something that was happening to me. And that is part of this thinking, I think, where if we don't check it and if we don't radicalize our thoughts and fight back constantly within our own heads, it can be a slippery slope to being you know so yeah, I have been working very deeply on that aspect of self-care, and I call it self-care because at the end of the day no one benefits more from it than you, once you look into those thoughts. And I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, I have no negative thoughts. That's not true. But I think there's a way to process those thoughts, and we technically lash out or lash inwards, and they're all ways of control or feel that come from a feeling of lack of control or wanting control. They come from deep insecurities. They come from deep patterns that have been put into us through um, a misogynistic culture that we exist in. And so, yeah, it's complicated, and it's not always easy to show up as your best self, especially when you're showing up only to yourself, right? But being alone for so many hours during this time and just sitting with my thoughts has been a great place to start work on that and to question um, who I want to be at the end of this. And that's the other thing I think that cancer does. Lisa Ray, who is such a wonderful human being and an advocate of living positively post cancer, she's a dear friend as well. And right at the very start, she said, I'm sorry that you have to go through this, but you know that it can be a doorway. And the question is, are you going to step through it? And adversity comes to each of us at some point in our lives. But I really did want to think of it as that doorway to something better. And once I stepped through the doorway, I'm not kidding when I say that I don't even see it as a better place or something I need to get over or something I need to fight. I actually see it as a gift that came into my life because I don't think I would have ever had these conversations or these thoughts if I hadn't been pushed against the wall so harshly as cancer has done to me. And one of the other things that I started as a practice, and I don't think you need to have cancer to do this, is actually talking to my body. And I don't think we acknowledge our body as this living, breathing being. We think of ourselves as our mind, and the body exists as something the mind dolls up or presents to the world. But we are very much our bodies as well, right? And feeling that connection and talking to my body and asking it each morning, how are you? How are you doing today? Or telling it during a meditation that, every cell in you is alive and well and you're good and I'm going to take care of you. Um, I read the story of one cancer survivor who said that she just told her body every day, I'm showing up for you. I'm here for you and I'm not going to let go. And so I've been having these really kind of um, I won't even say they're deep. They're just really like kind conversations with my body, who I didn't acknowledge for so many years. And to acknowledge that and to say, you have done so well for me, despite all the alcohol I've put in you, despite all the shitty food I've put in you, despite all the trashy things I've done to you, you know, you have shown up for me consistently and I am going to show up for you and I'm going to take such good care of you and thank you for being there for me and we're on this journey together. And it's so beautiful to kind of become friends with your body at this age, and I think once you do that, you no longer judge it so much for how it looks, it's or even how it's performing. You have a deeply empathetic relationship then with your body, and so that's the place I'm trying to be in mostly. And it really is beautiful. And I think for a long time, I didn't want to do these things also because they just seemed so um, woo woo. I was like, oh my goodness, like, am I really going to be someone who like manifests good health? Like, this is so ridiculously cheesy. Um, and I think that we are a generation of cynics, and I don't blame us. Look at the world around us. But I think I confused my spiritual relationship with my body with what was going on when it came to spirituality and religion in the country around us and the world around us. And I began to view my relationship with what I call the spiritual through this lens. And it became very tarnished by that. And I wanted to step away from anything that kind of acknowledge the divine, even because to me it just felt disgusting because of the violence done in the name of the divine around this world, particularly in this moment we're living in, particularly in India. I just did not want any part of that. And so it's also been a process of kind of reinventing what the spiritual means for me. What does it mean when something moves you so deeply that it helps you believe that there is a power greater than you, and that power is not a man. That power is just something gorgeous out there that you are going to apply to your life in the best possible way. And maybe we are that power. Maybe that power resides within you. I don't know, but it has been a really, really beautiful journey. And I do know that it is partly a cliche as well to kind of be hit by cancer and then to begin to believe in something greater than yourself. But perhaps that's why it is a gift.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Karuna. And I think so much of the wisdom that you've shared is are things that women, including myself, should begin applying immediately. Rest, honor the incredible resilience and joy and feeling that this body gives you. And I think that it would really do us all well to also realize that perhaps our appearance is one of the less interesting things about us, actually. Like so many of the things that maybe we don't even take the time to think about. Like so much of life is spent just not questioning and just doing, just
Yeah.
paying the bills and losing the weight. And I don't know, I read the other day,
Yeah.
like, there's more life than paying bills and losing weight. And I thought, I hate why
Yeah.
are
I
memes
mean,
so profound sometimes? And it's sad that it takes sometimes these drastic events, to make you stop and see what should have been obvious all along. And
yeah.
I think, unfortunately, when big events like that happen, actually the time for reflection with others is really rare. So thank you for being so generous with that, because I really think we've all got to um, to 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 begin doing all these things
Yeah.
now instead of
Yeah.
waiting
We shouldn't have
for.
to wait for something um, big or horrible to happen. And I know that's easier said than done, but if there's any way to live like you have cancer, I would say do it. And I'm still on this journey, Lisa, and I don't know how it's going to end or where it's going to end, but I will say that I'm really enjoying it. And that might sound ironic because I do have cancer and it isn't always fun. But I am trying to enjoy this journey as much as I can and to honor it as part of my wider journey as well. And I just wanted to say thank you for offering to have this conversation with me, despite the fact that my book is currently on hold because of what I'm going through, and welcoming that we could have a different kind of conversation about the body and giving me a space to voice these feelings and thoughts in a way that is not just generous, but also empathetic and sensitive. And trust me, so many people have asked me the wrong questions or not listened or judged the way I'm approaching this journey. And I didn't feel any of those things from you. I only felt welcomed and loved and heard. So thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you, Karuna. I wish I could give you a big hug, because I
Big hug.
really like. Yeah, I feel like we were meant to be friends sooner. I relate to so much of what the way you described. I think I could listen to you all day. So, thank you for giving me this opportunity to listen to you and to help share your perspectives on what you're going through. To everyone tuning in, thanks so much for joining us on Love Matters, produced by Indian Express and DW, Germany's international broadcaster. We would love to hear your thoughts on this podcast. If you do want to reach out to us, you can write in at lovematters@dw.com. Please do share this with your friends and family, subscribe wherever you're listening, and do join us again next time.